The sound of glass shattering echoed in the dark room, and Ethan Miller felt his heart pound like a war drum. Daniel Carter said, "You never saw it coming, did you?" The words sliced through the silence, colder than the night air outside. Ethan's voice trembled. "What have you done, Daniel?" The betrayal was raw, his best friend standing before him like a stranger wearing a familiar face. Memories of shared laughter and trust twisted into knives inside his chest. Olivia Hayes had warned him once, her whisper drowned by Ethan's blind loyalty, and Marcus Reed's worried glances suddenly replayed in his mind. Every heartbeat screamed of deception. The night was no longer safe, their friendship no longer sacred. Ethan realized he was standing inside the ruins of something he once believed unbreakable, and the truth felt heavier than the broken glass beneath his feet. The silence that followed was heavier than words. Ethan's thoughts spiraled back to their teenage years, running through rain-drenched streets, laughing until their sides hurt. Daniel had been his brother in every way that mattered. Ethan whispered, "How could you do this to me?" But Daniel only stared, lips pressed in a cruel line. Olivia's heart sank as she leaned against the frame, memories of shared dinners and promises of loyalty flashing in her mind. Marcus clenched his fists quietly, knowing the truth had been waiting to surface like a predator in the dark. Ethan's chest tightened. The betrayal wasn't just a sudden wound. It was years in the making, a slow venom that now revealed its fatal bite. Ethan remembered the night Daniel swore loyalty under the stars, both promising never to betray each other. That vow now rang hollow in his ears, a ghost haunting the room. Daniel's silence spoke louder than any denial. Olivia whispered, "Ethan, stop. Don't push him." Her words trembled with fear, but Ethan's chest burned with questions that demanded answers. Marcus stepped forward, breaking his usual quiet stance, his voice rough. "You knew this was coming, didn't you?" The weight of those words settled heavily. Ethan stared at Daniel, the boy he once trusted with every secret, now a man who seemed unrecognizable. Each second stretched longer, like waiting for thunder after lightning. The room felt like a battlefield, though no weapons had been drawn. Ethan's voice cracked. "All those years meant nothing to you?" Daniel finally answered, "They meant everything to me, until they didn't." His words sliced through Ethan's chest, the cruelty deliberate. Olivia closed her eyes, tears threatening, while Marcus stared in disbelief. The sound of a clock ticking nearby marked each second like a cruel reminder of time wasted on a friendship already dead. Ethan's knees weakened as his memories of trust shattered alongside his heart. The walls seemed to close in, pressing the four of them into a suffocating truth. A friendship was gone, buried under Daniel's cold ambition. Ethan's voice lowered, softer now, as though speaking to a ghost. "I would have given you everything, Daniel. Why steal what you could have asked for?" Daniel didn't flinch, his eyes dark with unspoken motives. Olivia whispered Ethan's name, her tone breaking, but he couldn't look away from the stranger standing before him. Marcus exhaled sharply, his silence heavier than words, knowing this confrontation was only the beginning of a greater storm. Ethan's chest ached with the realization. His best friend was gone, replaced by someone who no longer cared for their shared history. The room seemed colder, emptier, as though even the air had turned against him. The memory came back with the smell of rain on asphalt when Ethan and Daniel sprinted barefoot through flooded streets, their laughter echoing under dim streetlights. Ethan shouted, "We'll always have each other." Daniel grinned, raising his hand for a high five that splashed droplets across their faces. Olivia had watched from a dry porch, smiling at their bond as though it were something eternal. Marcus leaned against a lamppost, shaking his head at their recklessness, yet admiring the fire of their friendship. The storm raged around them, but it couldn't touch what they shared that night. Ethan believed no darkness could ever pull them apart. Ethan sat with Daniel on a rooftop, their sneakers dangling over the edge as the city lights shimmered below. Daniel said, "No one will ever come between us." Ethan laughed, tossing a soda can into the night, the fizz echoing in the quiet. Olivia had climbed up once to join them, her voice soft as she teased, "You two act like brothers more than friends." Marcus, sitting behind them, muttered, That's what makes it dangerous if it ever breaks. They ignored him, believing loyalty was their shield. The skyline felt like a promise carved in the stars, but promises were fragile things. At Ethan's family barbecue, Daniel flipped burgers on the grill while Ethan handed out plates, their rhythm as seamless as family. Ethan's father laughed, "You two could run this house together." Daniel smirked, "Maybe one day." Olivia handed Ethan a glass of lemonade, her smile warm, but her eyes lingered on Daniel with a softness Ethan didn't notice. Marcus leaned against the fence, watching with a silent weight, sensing things the others ignored. The sun dipped low, painting the yard in gold. Ethan's chest swelled with pride. Daniel wasn't just his friend. He was family. Or so he thought. The late-night study sessions came back to Ethan, where he and Daniel huddled over textbooks lit by a single desk lamp. Daniel yawned, "If we survive finals, we can survive anything." Ethan laughed, pushing a cup of coffee toward him. Olivia stopped by with snacks, saying, "You'll burn yourselves out," but her gentle smile betrayed her admiration. Marcus sat on the floor with his headphones in, pretending not to listen, though his eyes caught every detail. In that cramped room, their laughter and shared struggles built the illusion of forever. Ethan had believed those nights were unshakable foundations. Ethan's memory painted the lake at sunrise, where he and Daniel skipped stones until their arms ached. Daniel said, "This is our place, no one else." Ethan nodded, believing it sacred. Olivia sat on the dock, feet in the water, whispering about dreams of escape. Marcus leaned on his bike nearby, watching the ripples with solemn eyes. The horizon blazed orange, and the water shimmered like liquid fire. Ethan's chest filled with peace, convinced the bond he shared with Daniel was eternal. He never imagined that one day, this same memory would burn him like salt in a wound. Ethan noticed the first fracture when Daniel stopped answering his calls, excuses piling up like dust on forgotten shelves. Ethan said, "You've been distant, man." Daniel laughed it off, "Just busy." But the hollow tone carried something sharper than truth. Olivia watched Ethan's face fall, her hand hovering as if to comfort him but never landing. Marcus muttered under his breath, "Busy isn't always the whole story." The silence that followed clung heavier than words. Ethan tried to dismiss it, convincing himself his best friend would never abandon him. Still, the seed of doubt had already been planted deep. The next crack appeared at a party, music pounding while Daniel slipped away to whisper with strangers. Ethan caught sight of his friend, his chest tightening at the secrecy. Olivia asked, "Why do you look so worried?" Ethan forced a smile. "It's nothing." But his eyes betrayed him. Marcus saw it too, shaking his head with silent warning. Daniel returned later, arm draped casually over Ethan's shoulder, pretending nothing was wrong. Ethan felt the weight of that touch. It was heavier than any lie, as if his trust was being chipped away with every careless grin Daniel offered. Ethan began to notice Daniel's gaze lingering too long on Olivia, a flicker of something he couldn't name. Olivia laughed nervously, brushing a strand of hair back as if unaware. Ethan asked himself silently, "Is he looking at her the way I think he is?" Marcus caught the exchange, his lips tightening as if biting down on the truth. Daniel finally said, "You've got a good one there, Ethan." The words were meant to sound friendly, but they carried a venomous undertone. Ethan's stomach churned. He wanted to believe it was nothing, but his heart screamed otherwise. The silence between Ethan and Daniel grew longer, stretching into days where laughter once lived. Ethan asked, "Why don't you tell me what's going on?" Daniel replied coldly, "Not everything's about you." Olivia flinched at the sharpness of his tone, her hand brushing Ethan's shoulder in comfort. Marcus exhaled, breaking the stillness. "That's not the Daniel I used to know." Ethan's chest burned, the words slicing deeper than any blade. The brotherhood he trusted was unraveling thread by thread, and Ethan could only watch as the bond slipped away into shadows he couldn't control. Ethan sat alone that night, staring at old photographs of him and Daniel, laughter frozen in time. His chest tightened as he whispered, "Where did we go wrong?" Olivia sat beside him, gently saying, Some things break long before we notice. Marcus entered quietly, adding, or maybe he wanted it to break. Ethan clenched the photo until the edges bent, memories bleeding into heartbreak. Outside, the city lights flickered, mirroring the instability inside him. Every smile in those pictures now felt like a lie. Every promise a shadow of betrayal creeping closer. The truth arrived not with thunder, but with a whisper Ethan wasn't meant to hear. Standing outside Daniel's apartment, he froze when Olivia's voice carried through the slightly open window. She said, "If he ever finds out, it'll destroy him." Daniel's reply was sharp. He was never supposed to know. Ethan's chest hollowed as silence swallowed the night. Marcus, who had followed him there, whispered, "You don't want to listen to this." But Ethan couldn't move, his ears clinging to every word like barbed wire. In that instant, the past years of loyalty unraveled, and the knife of betrayal finally cut deep. Ethan stormed inside, glass rattling as the door slammed. His voice cracked. "How long have you been lying to me?" Daniel's eyes widened, then hardened, his mask slipping into a smirk. Olivia gasped, covering her mouth, tears welling as the room collapsed under truth. Marcus stood in the doorway, his face carved with sorrow, witnessing the friendship's funeral. Daniel finally spoke. "Since the day I realized I deserved what you took for granted." Ethan's chest burned, the weight of betrayal crushing him. The air itself seemed to shatter as silence bled into rage. The confession spilled like poison. Daniel said, "I wanted what was yours. Your trust, your place, her attention. I wanted it all." Ethan staggered as though struck. Olivia cried, "You don't mean that." But Daniel only laughed bitterly, his eyes sharp as knives. Marcus clenched his fists, his voice low. "This isn't envy anymore. It's cruelty." Ethan's world spun as he replayed every memory now drenched in venom. He whispered, "You weren't my friend. You were my shadow waiting for the right moment to strike." The silence afterward was heavier than any scream. Ethan grabbed the shattered frame from the shelf, the photo of him and Daniel smiling in better days. He shouted, "Was it all fake?" Daniel's glare didn't soften. "It was real. Until I realized I deserved better." Olivia sobbed, shaking her head, unable to believe the man she once trusted. Marcus stepped forward, his voice edged with fury. "You betrayed more than him. You betrayed all of us." The room felt like a grave, each word a nail sealing the coffin of what once was unbreakable. Ethan's grip tightened on the frame until glass cut into his hand. But the pain was nothing compared to the truth. The betrayal felt final, like a door slammed on Ethan's soul. He whispered, "You were my brother," his voice cracking under weight. Daniel answered with chilling calm, "And I chose to bury that brotherhood." Olivia collapsed into a chair, whispering prayers no one heard. Marcus shook his head, eyes dark with disappointment, as though mourning both men at once. Ethan's chest rose and fell, rage and grief consuming him, but beneath it all lay one truth. The boy he once called family was gone. What remained was an enemy wearing his best friend's face. Ethan's voice broke the silence like a thunderclap, his words trembling yet fierce. "You took my trust and buried it under your lies." Daniel laughed bitterly, each sound cutting deeper than steel. "I only took what you flaunted like it was yours alone," he spat. Olivia's sobs filled the space, her hands clutched tight against her chest, as though holding her heart from breaking in two. Marcus muttered, "This isn't just betrayal, it's cruelty dressed as ambition." Ethan stepped closer, his eyes burning, fists shaking at his sides. He shouted, "I defended you when no one else would. I stood by you when the world turned its back, and you chose to carve me open instead." Daniel's smirk faltered, but his pride didn't bend. He whispered coldly, "I never needed saving. I needed to win." The words slammed into Ethan's chest, heavier than fists. For a moment, time stopped, leaving only the sound of Olivia's muffled sobs and Marcus's labored breathing. The storm of their friendship had finally erupted, and the destruction would leave nothing untouched. Ethan's chest heaved, every breath a war against his own breaking heart. He shouted, Do you even remember the boy who swore we'd never betray each other? Daniel's eyes flickered, but pride held him firm. That boy was weak, he snapped. Olivia's voice cracked through the tension. No, that boy was loyal. Something you killed. Marcus stepped closer, his voice like gravel. You're proud of this? Of tearing apart the only family you had? Daniel's jaw tightened, his smirk fading to a snarl. Family is a cage, he said, and I've finally broken free. Ethan's hand slammed against the wall, the sound echoing like a gunshot. You didn't break free, he roared. You broke me. Olivia sobbed harder, whispering Ethan's name, her voice trembling with helplessness. Marcus's eyes glistened, though his fists stayed clenched. The walls seemed to vibrate with the storm of rage, grief, and loss, as if the room itself could not contain the wreckage of their friendship. Ethan staggered back, voice low but seething. You were my brother, Daniel. Every victory I had was yours too. Why wasn't that enough? Daniel's reply was venomous, because I was always standing in your shadow. Olivia gasped, her hand reaching out but finding only air. You chose envy over love, she whispered. Marcus's anger finally spilled over, his voice sharp as steel. Shadows only exist where light is given. You made yourself his enemy. Ethan's eyes burned as he shouted, I would have given you everything, Daniel, but you wanted to watch me bleed instead. Daniel stepped forward, closing the distance, his face twisted with rage. I wanted to see if you could bleed at all, he growled. The room's air thickened, each breath like smoke, the tension so heavy it seemed the walls themselves would crack. Olivia's sobs echoed faintly, and Marcus's silence carried the weight of judgment. The confrontation had reached the point of no return. Ethan lunged forward, grabbing Daniel's collar, his voice breaking with pain. Say it. Say you were never my friend. Daniel stared back, his smirk gone, eyes dark as stone. I was your friend, he whispered, until I realized being your friend meant being no one. Olivia screamed, Stop, her voice cracking under the weight of despair. Marcus moved forward, ready to intervene, but froze as he saw the raw anguish carved into Ethan's face. Ethan's grip shook, torn between rage and grief, as memories of their laughter, promises, and childhood faded like ash in fire. Daniel didn't resist, his calmness cutting deeper than violence. You needed me, he said coldly, but I never needed you. Ethan's knees nearly buckled, his world collapsing under the cruelty. Marcus's voice rumbled like thunder, You've destroyed the only thing worth saving. The silence that followed was suffocating, filled with Olivia's sobs and Ethan's trembling breaths. The storm inside Ethan erupted into silence, his hands finally releasing Daniel's collar, as if dropping the weight of their entire history. He whispered hoarsely, I loved you like a brother, Daniel, and you chose to turn that love into a weapon. Daniel's lips curled, his voice flat, and weapons are what win wars. Olivia collapsed onto the couch, sobbing uncontrollably, her body shaking under the wreckage of their bond. Marcus turned away, his shoulders trembling, unwilling to let the others see his grief. Ethan's chest heaved, his heart torn but unwilling to collapse entirely. He said with finality, Then this war has already taken everything worth fighting for. Daniel didn't reply, his silence sharper than any blade. The room was still, except for Olivia's sobs and Ethan's shallow breathing. In that moment, everyone realized the friendship had not just died, it had been murdered, and the killer stood smiling in the same room. The night after the confrontation, Ethan sat on his apartment floor, surrounded by shards of the past. Old photos and torn letters scattered like ashes of something once sacred. His voice cracked as he whispered, I trusted him with my soul. Olivia sat beside him, eyes red from tears, her hand resting gently on his arm, but even her presence couldn't close the wound. Marcus leaned against the wall, silent but steady, his gaze heavy with sorrow. The room smelled of stale coffee and burnt-out candles, as if the air itself grieved. Ethan's chest rose and fell, the silence suffocating him. He finally muttered, I'm not sure who I am without him. Olivia's voice trembled, You're someone stronger, because you survived him. Marcus added quietly. And because you faced what others would run from. Ethan's eyes burned with both pain and faint resolve, but the ache of loss was still louder than hope. Ethan wandered through the city streets at dawn, the air cold and sharp against his skin. The sidewalks were empty, save for his echoing footsteps. He whispered into the gray morning, "He was my brother, and now he's my ghost." Olivia walked quietly behind, her eyes soft but pained, unwilling to leave him alone. Marcus trailed at a distance, his shoulders heavy with unspoken words. Ethan stopped at a bridge overlooking the river, the sunrise painting the water in fire. He leaned on the railing, whispering, "I don't know how to let go." Olivia placed her hand over his, her voice barely audible. "You don't let go, you learn to live with the scar." Marcus's voice broke the stillness. "Scars are proof you endured." Ethan's breath trembled, the first fragile sign of healing flickering in his heart, though the ache was far from gone. Later that week, Ethan sat at the cafe where he and Daniel once planned their futures. The seat across from him was empty, yet heavy with memory. He traced a finger along the rim of his coffee cup and whispered, "I still hear his laugh." Olivia sat across now, her expression soft, voice steady. "Memories don't vanish, Ethan, but you choose what to do with them." Marcus stirred his drink silently, then finally spoke. "Some ghosts we keep to remind us never to repeat the past." Ethan stared at the empty chair, a lump rising in his throat. He realized the cafe had once been filled with laughter, but now it held only echoes. Still, in that echo there was truth. Daniel was gone, but Ethan remained. The choice of who he became next lay in his own hands. The realization was small but sharp, a fragment of strength among the ruins. Ethan visited the lake where he and Daniel once swore their bond was eternal. The water shimmered under twilight, ripples carrying memories like ghosts on the surface. He whispered to himself, "This was our place, and now it's my graveyard." Olivia stood near the dock, her arms crossed against the chill, her face etched with compassion. Marcus leaned against his bike nearby, silent but vigilant. Ethan picked up a stone and hurled it into the water, the splash echoing like a farewell. "I hate him for what he did," Ethan muttered, his voice breaking, "but I hate myself more for not seeing it." Olivia's voice carried across the dock, "You can't blame yourself for someone else's poison." Marcus added softly, "Sometimes betrayal says more about them than about us." Ethan closed his eyes, letting the sound of the waves drown his pain, if only for a moment. That night, Ethan stood before the mirror, staring at his reflection like it belonged to a stranger. His eyes were swollen, his body weary, but somewhere deep inside, a spark had survived. He whispered, "He broke my heart, but not my spirit." Olivia entered quietly, placing a blanket over his shoulders, her voice gentle, "You don't have to carry this alone." Marcus stood in the doorway, nodding, his silence heavy with support. Ethan's breath steadied, his fists unclenching at last. He looked into the mirror once more and said, "I will not let him define me." The words felt like a vow, not of revenge, but of survival. The air in the room seemed lighter, though the wound was still raw. Ethan knew healing would not erase the pain, but it would teach him to walk forward, and forward was the only path left. The days after felt like living inside a graveyard of memories. Ethan walked through the park where laughter once echoed, the silence mocking him now. He whispered, "Every step here feels like betrayal chasing me." Olivia walked beside him, her eyes carrying both sorrow and quiet strength. "You can't erase the past," she said softly, "but you can choose not to let it bury you." Marcus followed at a distance, his gaze heavy, knowing Ethan was carrying more than anyone could see. Ethan paused at the bench where he and Daniel once sat sharing secrets. He ran his hand across the worn wood, his chest tight, as though touching it hurt more than knives. He muttered, "This place was ours, now it's only mine." Olivia's hand brushed his shoulder, but it couldn't erase the sting. Marcus's silence loomed, heavier than words. The park felt less like home, and more like a museum of broken promises. Ethan found himself outside Daniel's old apartment, staring at the door like it was a locked vault of everything he lost. He whispered, "If I knock, what would I find? An enemy or a stranger?" Olivia stood by the steps, her arms crossed, eyes glistening with pain. "You won't find the man you once loved as a brother," she said, her voice trembling. Marcus shook his head, muttering, "That door holds nothing but poison." Ethan's fists clenched, his breath sharp. He wanted to scream, to demand answers that would never come. Instead, he whispered, "I gave him the best of me, and he left me with the worst of him." Olivia reached for his arm, pulling him back before he gave in to impulse. Marcus exhaled hard, the tension spilling into the night air. Ethan turned away from the door at last, but every step away felt like leaving behind a ghost that would never stop haunting him. The night carried Ethan to the rooftop where he and Daniel once dreamed beneath the stars. The skyline glowed, but now every light felt sharp, stabbing through memory. Ethan said, "This was where we promised forever." Olivia sat near him, whispering, "He broke that promise, but you still keep your word to yourself." Marcus leaned against the ledge, his eyes fixed on Ethan, his silence urging him to face the truth. Ethan tilted his head back, eyes shimmering with unshed tears, and muttered, "I'm not sure if I miss him or the boy I thought he was." The wind carried the words into the night, scattering them across the city below. Olivia pressed closer, her voice soft. "You miss the illusion." Marcus finally spoke, his tone steady, "And illusions are the cruelest betrayals." Ethan's heart cracked, but beneath the pain was a faint spark of acceptance. He couldn't change the past, but he could decide what lived inside him now. Ethan stood at the lake once more, twilight casting the water in bruised colors. He whispered into the fading horizon, "This was where I believed nothing could break us." Olivia walked slowly to his side, her voice steady though her eyes were glassy. "And this is where you let him go." Marcus stood behind, silent as stone, his gaze locked on the rippling surface. Ethan picked up another stone, gripping it until his hand shook. He threw it hard, the splash loud, violent, final. "I hate him," he muttered, "but hating him won't heal me." Olivia's hand brushed his arm, her words soft, "Then stop hating and start living." Marcus added quietly, "Living is the only revenge he'll never expect." Ethan stared at the water, his reflection fractured in the ripples. He realized he couldn't erase Daniel's shadow, but he could choose not to drown in it. The mirror greeted Ethan again that night. But this time, his reflection didn't look like a stranger. His voice was low but firm. "You broke me, Daniel, but I am still here." Olivia stood behind him, her presence quiet but unwavering, her eyes filled with hope for him. Marcus leaned in the doorway, his face carved with tired strength, a silent guardian. Ethan placed his hand on the mirror, whispering, "I lost my best friend, but I found the truth of who he was." He closed his eyes, the final scar etched inside him. His voice cracked but carried weight. "He didn't just betray me. He betrayed every version of us we could have been." Silence filled the room, but it was no longer suffocating. It was acceptance, sharp and bitter. Ethan turned away from the mirror, shoulders heavy yet resolute. The story was over, but the scar would remain forever.